I wanted to go back to some of the things that you mentioned about building out some of like the platform organization or the product organization or even infrastructure and some of the other functions you talked about. I guess how did you think about building out the different heads of function or the different executive engineering organizations? Was there a certain approach for like this is now a formal and like group, or was it because it reached a certain level of maturity and you had the right leader in place to sort of have it become its own entity? What was that like?
Yeah, I definitely thought of just in that process of being flat and then consolidating more. Hey, what are the top level teams, and who are the leaders for those teams that are going to help scale this? And again, we've talked about it being a journey, and where we are now is very different from where we were when I first joined, and that we are 3x the size, and so a lot of that is expected.
Was there a certain sequence of roles that you found to be most helpful? I know you talked about, like, one of the powerful questions being, "Are there any glaring gaps?" I imagine that probably played a role in, like, the prioritization of when certain things happened, but, is there a certain way you thought about sequencing certain roles or certain functions?
I started with the payments organization, but actually very quickly opened up a few more roles. Another example, I talked about infrastructure, but actually another area that I did focus on was I hired a chief information officer, and the I did that sometime last year when I was observing that, hey, we're going to be a much larger organization, for almost 4,000 employees. And we have a lot of these platform teams that it would help having a leader who could think through all of these different areas together. And so that was a role that I created, again, thinking of where the company was going, and just being a public company, how we would want to evolve our thinking in that area. Uh, and I wouldn't say that there's any. I don't at least have a magic recipe to sort of all of the roles to create. But I do think that one skill has served me well in thinking through all of this. It's that being very aware of where is the company going, what is the plan that every area has, and being quick to put all of those things together. Like sometimes you see that, okay, this team is in a big hole, and it's understandable, right? There is going to be some area that wasn't invested as much as we should have. But what you'll find is that the leader can proactively come and say, hey, at this point now, this is going to become a big risk if we don't invest in it. And I've seen some leaders do a phenomenal job with this, which is, hey, like, here's actually why, here's the cost of not investing in this. And here's the impact to the company, right? Where people are actually almost able to take themselves out of it and just look at the company and say, hey, here's why this is not going to be a good outcome. And I just feel that those leaders are able to get a lot of support because you look at it and you say, yeah, that's a very reasonable point of view. So I think for me, kind of, it's always when I talk to my direct reports, also like really understanding how they're thinking of the problems that they see. Because again, problems are everybody is going to have problems, right? You can have like set up your team perfectly, and there will still be some problem. But I think that that but the leaders that are really able to sort of think through those problems and say, yes, I see these problems, but here's how I'm thinking of tackling it. Like those are really the leaders that you can just see that they're gonna grow and blossom.
I really appreciate that. I wanted to go back into what you'd mentioned about bringing on the CIO. You were talking about how you were spotting the needs of the company is, you're getting to a scale of where you were going to bring on 4,000 or so people. So when you're looking at like the different needs of the roles, are there any signals that help you sort of anticipate the emerging or evolving needs of the company that help you sort of spot which ones you need next?
Yeah, I will say that for leaders, um, I think it's very valuable to have a benchmark in your mind of where companies, let's say 2x your size, how they are organized. And again, it doesn't mean that it's an exact playbook that you apply, but sometimes what I've seen is that people come from really big companies, and then when they join um, a much smaller company, sort of struggle to figure out how to make these roles meet because the delta is just so large. And so for me, I spent many years prior to this at a company a little bit bigger than us, so that knowledge was just very helpful because then you have a sense of kind of, hey, like what are the gaps that we are going to see, and again, it just helps you kind of think through like, okay, what are the problems that we are seeing. The other is, I think it's important to talk to people across the organization and understanding what gaps they are seeing, and understanding expectations from these other organizations. And you put all of that together, and you understand, you know your people well. And so what I did was really work with them and understand, like, hey, if I give them feedback, how do they respond? Or if I call out a gap that I've heard from another part of the organization, how do they take that feedback, and how do they respond? And sometimes, a great example of this is somebody will own this and say, okay, great, we actually we slipped on this, but here's why we're going to be much better in 3 months, right? And either I'm creating these roles, or something else. And so I think that I think to your original question of how do you know you need to create certain roles, I think it's that people you have what you have to treat as a constant is that people's roles are constantly going to evolve. And while some problems might be very small to solve today, in 3 to 6 months, they're actually big problems to solve. And so the leaders that are able to kind of look at those gaps, sort of like the way I'm saying, like, it's important for me to look across the organization and see kind of, hey, what is this other function that my team supports? Like, are they seeing this big glaring gap? I think that for the leader running a team, they have to do their own sort of analysis and figure out, hey, why is my roadmap actually the right roadmap? Right. And I've seen some people that like build a really good intake process or have a really great communication structure. Right. And so it's very clear, I think, that who is able to rise up just as um, all of the requirements are changing and evolving.